Hi, book babes. All right, we are coming at you with chapter 10. We are in October with a focus on pay attention and mindfulness. Over in the corner, she has her little bulleted points, which are meditate on koans, examine true rules, stimulate the mind in new ways, and keep a food diary. So going into mindfulness, we were just kind of talking about how it's an interesting take because we just don't have a whole lot highlighted for this one. And I think that if anything, I think it's fair to let that be known to our readers that you're not always going to resonate and highlight every single word in every single chapter and take all the takeaways from. Mm-hmm. And just being real, this is just kind of one of those chapters that you and I, we have things, but it wasn't the biggest chapter of our takeaways.
Well, and I love that you give that permission, because I think in anything that you learn, right, there's so much information out there in the world, but I think you've got to take what you need and leave the rest 100%. And like, I love getting the insights from other people because I don't take away those things often. Like, you'll bring things up and I'm like, oh my gosh, where was that at? I didn't even read it, right? But I think that's just it. You've got to take what you need and leave the rest. So as we dive into this, the meditating on koans, I think that's how you pronounce it, koans. And that's how I say it in my head. But yeah, I didn't really have any huge takeaways. I just found it so interesting because to me, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm such a logical person. Like, this doesn't make sense. What do you mean? What? I don't understand.
Have you ever tried meditating? Have you ever tried meditating?
Meditating is interesting. So have you tried meditating?
I think maybe once or twice, like a 3-minute thing on an app, a guided meditation, let it be known. I could never just could sit there. And so I don't know. I don't believe that it's hocus pocus, but I can't find myself to having done it consistently to believe in the non hocus pocus of meditation. Does that make sense?
For sure. I think with meditation, I don't think of it from the hocus pocus standstill. So why I meditate is so that my mind isn't talking 24/7. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but my mind is always like, oh, this, oh, that, oh, this, oh, that. And I'm thinking of a million different things. And so the goal for me for meditation is more just kind of to get rid of that anxiety and to finally breathe. So when I started meditation, I just went to YouTube and I typed in meditation challenge. And there was a 30-day meditation challenge with, her name's Faith. And it's so good. She is so, so good. But now on the fitness programs that I do at home, in the library that we have an entire guided meditation series, which I have done. And I absolutely love it. Short, just 10 minutes. But what I've learned is you've got to give yourself patience and grace. And so if the first day you can only do it for a minute or two, good, you're killing it. And you'll notice that you're not always really good at it. Some days you just have so much on your mind, but that's what you want to just be able to think it instead of hold it in here and not know about it, right? So when she was like, I don't want to meditate because that's weird, but then she's like, but I'll meditate on koans. What she's doing, the trick that she's doing is instead of thinking about all the busy work, she's thinking about solving this unsolvable problem. And so I think that's why it was interesting to me, because versus just trying to relieve the stress, she's trying to solve a problem in her head, which is, I'm totally a problem solver. So I was like, I can see how that works. But how do you come up with one of these things? I don't even know.
I'm not even sure either.
Yeah. Some of them are, the best way out is always through. We set out to be wrecked. Can't catch us fire. I don't even understand that. But I thought it was interesting that she found it powerful, because something that makes absolutely no sense to me, I'm like, wow.
And then she mentions in the end, she's like, that in turn brought the delicious intellectual happiness that comes from grappling with an expansive, difficult question. And I think that even if, the whole koans thing or anything of this is a little bit abstract, I think it's just simply the idea of grappling with tackling hard problems, because there is, same with puzzles or, any kind of word game, working your brain to figure something out, and then figuring it out gives you that little bit of a serotonin boost because you feel good because you figured it out. And I think that that's something just in general that I thought was interesting with this little tidbit that I might not have understood or grappled with well.
Yeah, I really like that. The next section is examine true rules. And I really loved her idea of true rules. It kind of challenged me to think if I have any, or like any that really are standard in my life. So what is a true rule? Although they may not fit precisely into the definition of, I don't even know how to say that word, heuristics. I had my own idiosyncrasy collection of principles, which I called true rules for making decisions and setting priorities. And then one of her father's true rules was, remember, it's one of the true rules, if you're willing to take the blame, people will give you responsibility. And it's like one of those things, you don't know that it's real until you're like in that situation and you're like, oh, okay, this makes sense, right? And so I thought that was really, really interesting.
I agree. And then she goes into some of her true rules being like, my children are my most important priority, get some exercise every day. Yes comes right away. No never comes, which I love that one. And then she goes into just speaking on how some of them were very helpful, ones that she had learned from her mom, and some that really define her life. And then realizing on the other hand that some of her true rules were unhelpful. And she talks about how she has that I'm always in a hurry, or like in my head, like I'm always busy. And I think that that's such a truth for so many people, because there's such a badge to busy. There's such a badge to rushing. And I think that acknowledging that that is something that you're living, and is it helpful to you or not, is really powerful that she talks about.
Absolutely. I have it highlighted here. By questioning my true rules instead of applying them unthinkingly, I could make sure I applied them only when they guided me to decisions that reflected my true priorities. So I think for me, her idea of true rules is just the idea of living intentionally, right? Like really creating intention about whatever it is her focus is. So being present where your feet are, like being in the moment, and not, letting go of the scatterbrain busyness, and instead like really applying that.
Very much so. And then she says, by mindfully deciding how to act in line with my values instead of mindlessly applying my rules, I was better able to make the decision that supported my happiness. And I think that that just kind of capsizes on just the providing yourself clarity, and not being so like abstract minded and so flighty and just kind of like busy bee, and actually, just like you said, I love the be present where your feet are. What are you doing right now? And are you actually in that moment? Or is your mind 5 other places doing all these other things? And I think that there's an idea of multitasking. And I think that a lot of people think, oh, I can multitask and I can do all these things. And as much as maybe you can do multiple things at once, how well are you doing those things? And if you actually took the time to just be intentional, it probably takes around the same time to complete those tasks individually and actually have quality and intention behind it than it does to try to do all 3 of them hectically, missing things because you're doing them all at once.
Absolutely. I love that. And then the next little section is stimulate the mind in new ways. And the part that I highlighted out of here, I very much am goal driven. And so the first thing that I highlighted was actually something that she got from one of her followers, like somebody who had commented on her blog. And they said what she does is she changes her passwords to a goal she's been working on that she wants to achieve. Because how often do you have to put in your passwords, right? So she'll put in the password, but she won't do like the remember me or whatever. And so every time she goes to put it in, it's her password across all platforms, but it's always that goal. It's always the thing she wants to be focusing on. So it's like, you see it constantly. And I'm like, that is brilliant. That's brilliant, because what you think of, what you think about, that's what you're going to focus on. Like if you're when you're looking for the red crown, looking for the red crown, looking for the red crown, and they're like, okay, well, how many blue crowns did you find? Well, you didn't, because you were looking at red. Same thing here. Like, you're gonna work on that goal. You're gonna look for that thing. And I was like, that's really good. I like that.
Exactly. And it kind of ties in just like, you know, if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again with the same results and expecting different results and still doing it over and over again, something to that extent. And I think that that's the stimulating your mind in new ways is just that. If you're, you know, maybe every morning you write down the same goal, but then that's all you do every single morning and you don't put any other thought in it. You don't do anything else with it. You're just writing this goal down every morning. And then you're like, why is this not happening? Well, you're doing nothing to stimulate your brain or doing nothing to do it. So maybe now, instead of just writing in the morning, maybe now in the mid-afternoon, you have an alarm that goes off. And when the alarm goes off, it's a pop-up reminder of your goal. I love the changing your password idea. So you have to type it in all the time. She also talks about like writing Post-it notes all over her apartment and having that. I am a weird fan of taking dry erase markers and writing on mirrors, because you can just take and erase those messages all that you want to. And I think just finding new incorporative ways to keep that goal in the forefront of your mind, I think is very, very critical in achieving it. And I love that she kind of touches on those cute little ways to do that.
Absolutely. I also found it very interesting how she challenged herself to try new things. And what was interesting is the things that she tried, she didn't necessarily love. Like, one of them was relaxation exercises. I remember one was like laughing yoga or something. And then she did the art where, like, when I look at those pictures, I was like, excuse me, that isn't the same person did not draw those. But that just goes to show. And I remember she said, like, it wasn't enjoyable for her, but sometimes, like, things that make you happy don't, like, what's the saying? Happy, it doesn't always feel good. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I love that she was able to like push herself out of her comfort zone to do something like drawing, because I think sometimes as adults, it's easy to be like, oh, well, I don't have that skill, so I'm never going to pursue it. And in like 100% transparency, I love dancing. I love the idea of dancing, any kind of like ballet, any kind of technical hip hop, but that just was not in the cards growing up. So I have always given myself like maybe the false narrative of, because I didn't have that training growing up, I could never do that now. And anytime I say it out loud, my husband's like, they have adult introduction hip hop classes. They have adult introduction classes. If you want to do that, why wouldn't you go do that? And I think that when I read this, I thought about, like, she went out, she's like, did a drawing class. And I'm like, you know, I could totally go and like do something. And maybe I'm going to find out that I hate dancing, that it's not anything like what I wanted to, but I did it. And so I think that going in 2021, I might use this as inspiration to take that class.
You know those God winks I always talk about? I think this is one of them again. Literally, I have wanted to do a hip hop dance class. And I was like, you know what? COVID's here. Everyone's teaching stuff virtually now. I bet I could find a virtual hip hop dance class, because I am from like rural, like very rural. So that's not really an in-person option on the normal, right? Like, I would have to drive quite a way to get there. And so I always was like, oh, well, inconvenience. Oh, well, mom life. But literally, just at the beginning of this week, I was like, I really need to go to Google and start looking for virtual hip hop dance classes. So like the fact that you said that, I was like, okay, God wink, heard you loud and clear.
So I guess in 2021, be watching our socials for Hannah and Deidra taking their first hip hop dance classes.
We're gonna dance off up in here.
You heard it here first. I agree. I think it's a God wink.
That's
and I think
hilarious.
I know what's funny is, weren't we just talking about how we didn't like take anything away from this chapter a whole lot? And every time we have that conversation with each other, we look back at what we highlighted and we get those little God winks of, hey, I know maybe that you didn't feel this entire chapter, but we're still here.
The the next little section is keep a food diary. And let's be real, that's my jam. I love living in intention. And this was a big game changer for me back in the day, because remember, as I started my transformation, it started with my health and fitness, and then it grew into my mindset. And so for me, I was already kind of doing this health and fitness routine. And then when I read this book, I was like, keep a food diary, of course, because what you track, you improve. So it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's food or not. Maybe you don't struggle with health and fitness and that's not your jam. It's fine. But what about your marriage? What about your finances? What about your sleep? What about your water? Any of those things that you start tracking on the daily and saying, okay, well, I got 5 hours of sleep. I got 20 ounces of water. Once you start tracking it, you really get to improve that, because you see where you're lacking. And then it's automatically like yourself. Your mind is like, oh my gosh, I am not going to eat that cotton candy, because then I've got to write it down in my food diary, right? And I know when I was not sleeping well as a new mom with 3 babies, it was making me very angry. Like I am grumpy when I don't get sleep. And so I got me one of those cheap little sleep trackers, because I was going to bed, but I wasn't sleeping through the night. And I used that tracker to start tracking my sleep and really setting these new sleep routines so that I was actually rested versus being like everywhere and totally exhausted. So I think it's so crazy powerful. Like what you track, you will improve.
Definitely. And I think because it becomes a truth when you track it. I think it's easy to dismiss or forget things. It's easy when, you're eating to grab that handful of cereal out of the cupboard really quick and eat that, but not remember, that maybe that's why your health goals aren't aligning. Or I'm the notorious, like my kids always leave something on their plate and I will pick up anything that they've ate and I will eat it because I don't want to waste it. It's just my kids' cookies, so it's not the end of the world. And those are the things that maybe you don't think about when you're like you are tracking your food. Those are those little nibbles and bites that do add up. And when you're actually being intentional about it, you're more likely to either not do it or ask just the simple question of, is this blessing me? Do I need this right now? And I think that was really key. And then she just talks about, even more so than the experience, it showed her why mindfulness helps you break bad habits. And I think that that's so powerful, because if it is in your face every single day, and you're being mindful about it, you are therefore going to make better choices. And I think that's why she talks about the food diary being so helpful. It's because you might not even realize how many sodas you're drinking, or how many times you're grabbing that snack, or how many times you're late night snacking. But if you were forced to write it down, the next day, you're going to question before you eat this. You're like, hey, I'm going to have to write this down. Do I want this? Yeah. And it forces you in that moment. It's not the writing it down. It's the next day when you have to be more conscious about it. And you know that you're going to be held accountable by writing it down. That's where that magic is. And I think that even if the food diary doesn't, everyone could do this with their finances, because I think it's really easy to swipe your card at the gas station or at Starbucks. And when you add that all up, it adds up. I follow a writer and a financial analyst. His name is David Bach, and he posted today about how, do you know how much it takes to blow $10,000 a year? Only spending $28 a day.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? And I think that's, how easy is it to go to, like to Target or the gas station or Starbucks? It adds up. Or, that fast food lunch. And I think that putting in perspective that, if you spend mindless money, $30 a day, $10,000, like what could you do with $10,000 if you were being more mindful about it?
Nickel and diming yourself to death. It's crazy.
Yeah. And if you were forcing yourself to, every time that you wanted Starbucks, you're like, oh, I'm going to have to write down this $6 and some odd cents. You're going to question, be like, is that really part of the money that I want to be spending today? and it forces you, is sometimes I'm sure the answer is going to be, yes, I need this $6 coffee, but I think it's going to force you to be more intentional, where more often than not, you're going to make those choices that better align with your happiness goals at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I think as this chapter closes, what I found the most interesting was, I love how she's addressing her happiness, but she also touches base on the people around her. She's also inspiring her husband and her sister to really take these little steps, and she talks about that, and I'm like, that's just more proof that your happiness and what you're doing in your life impacts the people around you. Because just because she's doing this thing and she's just talked about it and is just living it in her own ways, her husband has made small changes. Her sister is doing these small changes and was like, you know what? That does work. I'm so glad I tried it. And I thought that was super interesting.
I 100% agree. And I think it's kind of that a ripple effect, that sometimes we think that this is the selfish thing because we're focusing inward on ourselves, but we don't realize how much we impact other people. And by us being able to radiate more of that inner happiness and confidence and whatever it may be, it goes into those people and it kind of becomes contagious. And I think that that's the powerful thing to remember, is by you choosing that happiness, it ripples into your husband, who then might be going to work and being better to his coworkers, who's then he's going to go home and be better to his wife. And it ripples so quickly. And I think that that's something that I've loved about social media, is being able to cause that ripple more and quicker, because it's so powerful to watch when you're able to share like that happiness and be the light, and then see other people turn theirs on too.
Absolutely. This was a good chapter, even if it was short. I really loved like the big takeaways from it. So pay attention. You just got to be mindful, friends.
Mindful. Love it.
All right.
That's what we have.
We'll see you next time.